Started it.
We're only up at 8:30.
It's not. It's not coming up. It's not starting. I've started it. Oh, phew. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the BOFIN webinar on insecticide-free wheat. My name's Tom Allen Stevens. I lead the British On-Farm Innovation Network, and this is the very first of what I hope will be many meetings of the Genserus Circle. We're very grateful to RAGT for supporting this initiative. It's for growers who are looking to leave behind the use of insecticides on their crop. What we want to do is to develop with you the tools, the strategies, and the knowledge so that you can go insecticide-free with confidence. But before I introduce today's speakers, I'll just give you a bit of a preview of some of the other exciting projects we have coming up this year. So I'm just going to share my screen. Now, regular webinar attendees will know that we have some fascinating projects coming along this year, and we have a webinar to update you on these every third Thursday of the month. Now, there's a real opportunity to get involved in these projects, and for many of them, that will also include being paid to carry out on-farm trials. And that's not just trials for your own benefit, they're to advance science and to accelerate productivity for all UK farmers. First of all, we have harvest weed seed control. Now, I know that there's a lot of you who are interested in this one, and we're just now putting together the activities to take this research into its second year. So we'll be looking for seed scouts to provide data on grass weeds still standing at harvest, and those scouts will get tailored support and seed viability testing in return for taking part. So the date of this webinar is 18th of May. Will Smith from NIAB will be explaining what's involved, and Adam Driver, who's leading the project, will be sharing his experiences with the ReadyCrop Seed Control Unit and what the plans are to test that this year. And we'll shortly be sending out invites, so do take a look for that. And then we'll have a very ambitious and exciting project, which has also just got underway. This is a large industry consortium led by PGRO, looking to increase the use of pulses in the rotation and in homegrown feeding rations. The potential for greenhouse gas reductions is huge, and we'll be pioneering, we'll be looking for growers who have their pulse on their carbon footprint and who will pioneer strategies that will improve crop health, soil health, and ultimately save the planet. I mean, it's no less than I've described. And this webinar is planned for the 15th of June. So, and finally, we've got another project, a very ambitious project, again, an exciting one due to get underway shortly, which is Slimers. Now, this is another industry consortium, this time led by BOFIN. So we brought together some really defining research projects at the cutting edge of technology to redefine how we manage slugs. So really great opportunities to get involved in this one. And to be paid to carry out trials. So look out for the webinar provisionally planned for July. So let's move on to today's main event. There we go. Insecticide-free wheat. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but the only reason we currently use insecticides on the crop these days here is for BYDV control. And it's never really sort of sat right with me that this imprecise form of crop protection could be doing untold damage to beneficial insects at an important time of the year. So I'm delighted that Managing Director of ROGT UK, Lee Bennett, is joining us to give us an insight into the genetics of BYDV-resistant wheat and the UK field trials that have been scoping their performance. Now, grower efforts to move to insecticide-free wheat haven't gone unnoticed in Whitehall, as witnessed by the new £45 a hectare payment under SFI. Now, at the forefront of these discussions has been Martin Lyons, UK Chair of Nature Friendly Farming Network. And Martin will highlight ways in which enhancing benefits to boost beneficial insects can bring business as well as environmental benefits. Now, we'll then look at the practical experiences in the field. So Neil Potts, agronomist with Matford Arable Systems in the Southwest, he's going to offer his perspective on insecticide-free wheat. And we also have Kit Papworth, who farms in Norfolk, and he has experience of growing BYDV resistance RGT Wolverine. And he's going to relay where he is on the journey to become insecticide-free. And then we'll open up for questions, and you'll see at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A and a chat button that you'll see. Now, please put any questions you have in there, and towards the end, we'll bring you up, we'll bring you into the discussion so you can put these questions direct to the panelists. And please do get the discussion going in there. So we'll also be doing a poll, and one of the aims of today's webinar is to gather your thoughts and ideas on what we can do to support you and other farmers move away from insecticides. So is that on-farm trials? Is that get-togethers, webinars like this, or perhaps a meetup at cereals? Is it drawing together more of the experiences and the science that backs it up? We want your views. So without further ado, Lee, can I ask you to turn on your video and audio and join us? Now, I remember, Lee, attending the launch a few years ago of RGT Wolverine, the first wheat with genetic resistance to BYDV. And I remember thinking that the opportunity here is not just for BYDV control, but moving away from insecticides altogether. I mean, what's your view as far as that's concerned?
It was possibly overlooked at the time. The launch of BYDV-resistant wheats coincided perfectly with the ban of neonicotinoids on cereals, and it probably seemed too much of a seamless transition to move from a seed treatment solution to a genetic one. Probably the market wasn't ready for that. Market wasn't properly primed for that, and I think all the ancillary effects, the ancillary benefits of this were possibly overlooked at the time. We've taken that to pieces and rebuilt that, and I want to really look at this as a solution from a more holistic perspective, bringing in all the other benefits that not using insecticide and not having seed treatment available to you, that what genetic resistance would bring to the party.
Great. Well, I know you've got a presentation to give us, Lee. So do you want to kick it off?
If I can work out your technology, yes.
Yep, that looks good.
Yeah. Okay. So I'd like to introduce Genesis to you, going back to brass tacks in some respects. The first bit to clear up is where the name comes from, Gencerus. It's a truncation of genetic security virus. The background of the resistance has been a long time in the making. Within the wheat genome, there is no naturally occurring resistance to BYDV. This was sourced by an alternative means. It was found in a grass. Now, this was done over 2 decades ago by the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation in Australia. The reason it's been length in its coming is back then marker-assisted technology was absolutely in its infancy. So it's been a long drawn-out process to do it without the technology that we have available to us right now. So the resistance is derived from a wild ancestor of wheat itself called Tinopyrum intermedium It's a wild goat grass or a wheatgrass, and that's where the gene BDV2 is derived from. That has been translated into wheat as we know it, and what it does is it conveys resistance to, as far as we're concerned, all of the known BYDV virus isolates. What CSIRO have done is they've got this into a background of very typically Australian wheat. Right now, we're looking at the varieties Manning, McKellar and Glover, and these have been in the market for a long, long time, and they actively resist the effects of BYDV. When you look at this in a yield situation, so this is an Australian study from 2015, in a known situation where there was BYDV infection, we see these varieties rise straight to the top. So resistance is robust and works very capably. Since that time, this has been expanded around other continents of the world. So the University of Minnesota, they've created their variety, I'm guessing MN Washburn, Minnesota Washburn, which is a spring wheat, as by nature, that's what they would naturally grow. And that too has rose to the top in situation BYDV infection and no use of insecticide. New Zealand are in development along similar principles. And then more closer to home, if everyone remembers what was the former PBI, PBI acquired the genetics from CSIRO over 20 years ago, but this was acquired in a spring wheat background. So RAGT purchased PBI back in 2004, and so they took on the program. And so all since that time, what the concentration of effort has been is to get this into a background that looks more akin to what we would identify as being a domestic winter wheat. So the importance of this is a study from 2013 done by the precursor of the AHDB, the HGCA, and they looked at the impact of all the various pests on the winter wheat crop. So when we look at aphids in an untreated situation, so we're taking no action against any of these pests, 82% of the UK wheat area is susceptible to the effects of BYDV. And in a situation of you being the average farmer, then the average yield loss would represent itself at 8%. So when we multiply this up with current economics, so today's grain price, which doesn't reflect yesterday's by any stretch, but this is a very fluid market. What we do see is if we stack together the economic impact of all the pests of winter cereals together, they don't in unison come together to have the same economic impact that BYDV does. The financial penalty of this, even on average UK yields and only 5% yield loss is current economics about £85 a hectare, but you can see for yourselves what that could be up to. So the range of effect for BYDV is anywhere between 2 to 60% yield loss. We've recreated 60% yield loss in our trials nurseries, and in all seriousness, you just would not bother getting the combine out. There's just nothing left. Current control measures, we know all we have in post the neonic ban are pyrethroid insecticides. In one of the aphid vectors, the grain aphids, there's been acknowledged resistance in this for over a decade. And of course, like anything, the more exposure you give them to the control method, the worse you make the resistance. So you have to use full rates. Slashing rates for BYDV control is counterproductive. Depending on the product you use, they're all subject to a maximum number of applications from 1 to 4. And very well documented. Pyrethroids are not stable in sunlight. So the time of year when you are making these applications of insecticide, their persistence is pretty poor. So the sunnier it is, the more ultraviolet that we have, the less long they will last in their field persistence. And of course, like all pesticides, they are subject to the Sustainable Use Directive, which exists for many reasons. One is you have a justification for use. And this is all about effects on beneficials, looking for alternative means of control, effects on human health, etc., etc. So part of your justification for use would be crop monitoring. When we look at the behavior of the aphid vectors, crop emergence, the background, like the mother population, has limited impact, really. They're low in number. Chances are they are infected, but they are wingless. It's the subsequent generations, the progeny, that cause all the issues. And as the colony gets bigger, then they will start giving birth to live young that are winged. So the colony grows. Every hatch is determined by a T-sum figure, a temperature over time measurement. And in the case of the aphid vectors, that's 170 degrees, and that's recorded with temperatures over 3 degrees C. This starts at crop emergence and restarts after every time you spray. When we look at the recolonization, for flight activity, they need temperatures over 11 degrees centigrade. Once temperature starts to slide, then the efficacy of inoculation slides with it. So at temperatures less than 6 degrees, then your virus inoculation drops to about 25%. And at less than 3 degrees, then there's no activity at all. So the HDB very usefully provide us with access to a live monitoring system where you can put in your emergence data of your crop, you can select your region, and they're giving you two measurements. One is the measuring the T-sum figure, so they're accumulating these blocks over time, and if you can see that buff coloured bar in the top, in essence, that is your spray window, and you can see from that drop right back to reset. And then the other piece is the flight activity. So if you can see green under the blue line, that tells you that a proportion of that day, the temperature has been above 11 degrees C. So 11 degrees C would be represented on this graph by the 0.0. So if you've got T-sum accumulation and temperatures above 11 degrees C, you are going to get aphid expansion of population and also recolonization. So moving on to the thought process of control, like everything, if we use any product that is hazardous, we should perform a cost assessment. And that is the decision hierarchy tree right there. So if the problem is BYDV and my chosen control is pyrethroid, my thought process should be, is there another means of eliminating the use of that product, in this case, the pyrethroid? And in the case of a genetic solution, there absolutely is. So you answer the decision hierarchy for COSH by a genetic solution quite immediately. So when we look at the advantages of Genserus over pyrethroid control, we have no risk to the operator. We also have no risk to the general public should they decide to walk along a footpath through a freshly sprayed field. We've talked about this photo stability of pyrethroids. With a genetic solution, you get season-long control. It's there from the moment the crop emerges to the day it's harvested. We have no requirement for sprayer workload. There is no aphid resistance to it. And we're not increasing aphid resistance like repeated sprays of pyrethroid would. There's no requirement for crop monitoring. There's no cost of application, so long as you remember to drill the field. And there's no cost of chemical. And weather dependency, the obvious one with weather dependency in spraying is it too windy? But in recent times, it's been, can I actually travel? And the core one for me is beneficial insects are completely unaffected by this. So when you add all these together on the corporate social responsibility radar, we are very, very high. And of course, we are not creating any carbon during this process of having a genetic solution, as opposed to making pyrethroid sprays through the cost of manufacture, the cost of application, so on and so forth. You are creating a small carbon footprint. So when we look at past practice, we all know what we had before and the cost applied to it. So BYDV control was approximately in the upper 30s of pounds per hectare. Current practice now, post the neonic ban, is spray, possibly spray again, and even spray again. So BYDV control right now can cost for a single spray around about 13 or 14 pounds a hectare, up to 3 sprays of in the 40 pounds region. So the simple soundbite in terms of the costing of this technology is the trait element of the royalty rate is 15 pounds a hectare, which is roughly equivalent to the cost of 1 pyrethroid spray and the cost of application. 1 pyrethroid spray would last you at best a week. This is lasting you all season long with all the other effects thrown into boot. You have already mentioned the government mandate or the direction that they wish to take this in terms of insecticide-free. The government are only serious about things when they give you money. So they are prepared to pay £45 a hectare for people to take an insecticide route. But with that comes risk. Taking a genetic solution completely de-risks that. But when you add in the £45 a hectare that the government are prepared to offer up as part of the SFI, then this makes this very, very cost effective as a solution to control of BYDV while de-risking the situation. And then looking at the benefits of it, so that graph there shows the results of a whole range of varieties with and without the resistance in an inoculated background, and that represents 2 years, so last year and the year before, over 4 sites. And what we saw over that piece was an advantage of 1 3/4 tons a hectare for using the genetic resistance and not using insecticide. Just to give you a little bit of a breakdown, so the yellow bars, they represent the insecticide-free yield. The black bars are the treated ones across a whole range of varieties. I think it's more graphic to show that same information in a different way, which is that. So using grouse as the control, RGT grouse, which is a current commercial variety that carries the Gensus resistance, you can see the yield deficit from a whole host of other varieties in a situation where insecticide wasn't used. And then more pertinently, looking at grouse in a straight head-to-head against Gleam, which is a popular variety, is currently the 4th or 5th most widely sold variety in the country. We're seeing repeatable advantages over Gleam in a situation where there is BYDV present and no insecticide is applied. What's next? So right now, going through the proofing system, so the national listing registration system, we have a variety called RW42109. This is a bread making wheat from our own internal work that we have independently checked by all the millers that you would readily identify with. They are ranking this as being of excellent bread making quality. We have the results that endorse that picture. So this is quite an exciting development because we have here potential group 1 bread making that not only is resistant to the effects of BYDV, but is also orange wheat blossom midge resistant. So when you start talking the story of insecticide-free wheat for human consumption, then the consumers get quite excited by that as a prospect. And then looking into the future, there's some company confidential information in here, but think of a variety, and pretty much we now have that in not only a virus-resistant background, but quite often virus and orange wheat blossom midge resistance as well on the original parent that carried neither of the resistances. So the future is looking quite exciting in terms of having genetics to answer the insecticide-free wheat as a solution. And that's me done.
Great, thank you very much, Lee. No, that's fantastic. That's a really great introduction to the insecticide, the BYDV resistant trait. I'm delighted that we have with us Martin Lyons from the Nature Friendly Farming Network. So Martin, would you and he's going to be telling us a little bit more about the nature friendly way of farming. So Martin, would you like to join us? Great, fantastic. Martin, I believe you've got a presentation that you're going to, would you like to introduce yourself and give your presentation, please?
Yeah, good morning, and thanks for the opportunity and the invite. I'll see if this works. Is that right?
Yeah, looks great.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm Martin Lyons. I'm a predominantly arable farmer in Cambridgeshire. I'm also the UK chair for the Nature Friendly Farming Network. I put the title up, Nature-Based Integrated Pest Management, because I'm very focused around how do we make nature work for us across our farm landscape and improve our bottom line. As farmers, we're running businesses and we need to get that balance right. So my journey started probably over 20 years ago when we started entering some stewardship agreements, and each agreement has evolved. We're now just going into the new countryside stewardship agreements. And back then it was just about some margins. And then we really started looking at taking about the unprofitable bits of land and squaring bits of fields up and looking at what could we put within those pieces of land to earn more money and make the business stack up better. And you'll see by the pictures in the left-hand one, it was at the shady sides of woods, squaring the edges of fields off, and the right-hand one, just where there's odd-shaped bits, making our fields more efficient and putting areas of habitat into the field. At the time, I didn't really understand the benefits of that, and we sort of straightened water courses up, and we'd thought about the farm as a whole integrated farm and interconnecting habitats right across our farm landscape. I say at the time, I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do, and the advice I was getting that it would be the good thing to do, but I didn't really understand the whole farm benefits in what we did. So we put various birdseed mixes in, various other options right across our landscape, but the ones that really started to open my eyes in the real benefits to my bottom line, the birds were great, seeing those increase, and the butterflies and other bits. But they were just the pretty things for me. It was these flower margins we connected across the farm landscape that were full of pollinators that were actually increasing my yield, and my yield mapping, they were better near these areas than are further away. And 9 years ago now, in the top left-hand picture, there's you've got a margin there, and in the top corner there is the cropped area. And we had a field of winter beans that was full of black bean aphids in May. The recommendation was to stick another insecticide on. We're a normal farmer, we were quite happy to tip an insecticide on every time we went through with a sprayer if we thought there was a risk, because it's easier to apply and it was cheaper while we're passing. We had those black bean aphids. It was wet and windy for about 10 days. The agronomist was saying, I need to get on there. My father was on my back saying, we need to get on there and we're going to lose the crop. So after about 10 days, the weather changed and the weather calmed down. We can get out there with the sprayer. And before I'd gone out that morning, my father said to me, what's the point? You're too lazy. I hadn't got out there. There was a couple of evenings I could have managed to get the sprayer on, but I'd gone out with some mates, so that didn't go down very well. But what I found in the field when I went and looked, most of those aphids nearest the flower margins had actually disappeared, and they were full of lacewings and ladybirds and other beneficiaries that were in these margins that were coming out and eating the aphids for me. At the far end of the field, there was still some aphids, but beneficials were in there. So we didn't bother spraying the field. I couldn't see the economic benefit of traveling through the field, knocking some of the beans down with the sprayer, because most of the aphids at that time had gone. And it started making me think about how does these biodiversity areas can complement our cropping. And the next year we cut back a lot more. And then the following year we've stopped using insecticides altogether right across our farm. I just couldn't see the benefit of having areas of habitat that increase biodiversity and then using an insecticide in the middle of the fields that would cause harm to those and all the other beneficiaries and the pests and the beneficiaries. So we started to think in a slightly different way and how we can stack things up. So that as we entered into develop these schemes, we're trying to deliver an interconnected landscape using all the edges and unprofitable or unmanageable or don't fit my large modern machinery. So we have watercourse buffers with flowers, buffers by hedgerows. That means I do all the hedgerow management at night, after winter or after Christmas during the winter. So the operator gets to sit in a nice warm cab and does his hedge cutting. But these hedges become vertical flower margins during the spring and summer, full of pollinators and predatory insects, and they can come out and manage our landscape. We have a variety of flowering margins across. And then as the understanding started to grow, the bottom left-hand picture, you'll see the strips in the field. And this was part of a trial we were conducting on one of the farms where they're putting strips in the middle of the fields. And we started to see the increased benefit in doing that. So I'm involved in a whole number of trials to help me understand better what does nature offer me for free if I can get the habitat and the management of our landscape right. This was a trial done in some spring beans with PGRO. We were farm A in the spring when they're doing their net catching and various other way of collecting the data. Our spring bean weevil damage was 6%. On a control on farm B, it was 20%, and on farm C, it was 23%. Farm C is seen as a normal traditional farm, cropped to the edge, uses regular amounts of insecticide. Farm B I found most interesting because that was from a leaf demonstration farm, so we know it does a whole integrated farm management system, but they're occasionally using some insecticides where they see fit or need to, but they still left a lot of damage. What was really interesting is when we come to harvest time, we had 11% damage in our beans, made human consumption. Farm C was 23%, and they didn't make the human consumption, they're out of spec. And if we look at the bottom images, on farm A, the orange is the beneficiaries. We are adding more beneficiaries to our farm's landscape that can manage and control many of our pests. So, and the other two farms, so we had 2/3 beneficiaries to 1/3 pests. Other two farms, it was 2/3 pests. We need to swing the dial towards us in making sure we have beneficiaries. And that's why I'm so keen on one, stopping using insecticides, but also making sure we can help other farmers see the benefits of putting habitat on farms, hopefully using public and private finance in delivering those outcomes, but see the benefit that it delivers for the farm bottom line, but also for biodiversity. And how do we get the balance right across our farm landscapes? And this was another trial we've been involved with, putting the strips in the middle of the fields. Many of our large fields, I'm in Cambridgeshire, many of our fields have been enlarged through previous incentivifications from government, filling in ditches, pulling out hedgerows. And we've done the practice of putting habitat just around the outside, but that has seen some clear benefits having those margins compared with without. But the treatment 3, where those margins were put in approximately every 100 meters, depending on spray width, but the trial data showed that biodiversity travels between 40 and 80 meters, depending on the species. Some of the winged ones will go a lot further. But if you had things about 100 meters, depending on your spray width, so you can fit it in evenly, there was beneficial and management control in the middle of the fields. So this is what they're finding with the margins around the ordinary fields. They're seeing a 16% net yield benefit. And where you add those stripes into the large fields, you're seeing a 17.9 yield benefit across all cropping systems and all inputs. And that's how, for me, and I think for many farmers are now starting to think about how do we add in these options and how do we put the right options in the right place to mitigate our use of insecticides and other pesticide use, and see nature as a benefit. Nature's free if we can get it right. It can be a cost to our business. Within our own operation, we grow winter cereals and spring cereals. We have seen occasional patch of BYVD in some of the fields, but it's never been a large problem. And we have a diverse rotation, so the risk is minimized because it's only on one of two fields. And certainly as we go forward and government are incentivizing insecticide-free farming for £45 a hectare, across our farming operation of all what we do, that's going to be some £20,000. I can afford some risk in one or two crops, but it does mean we try and drill a little bit later if the weather allows, so there's less of that pressure in that late September, warm weather, high numbers of aphids might be floating about. So the opportunity of maybe having some insecticide-free wheat varieties that could ease that pressure while farmers adapt and get that habitat back into their farm's landscape. It probably takes us about 3 years to put biodiversity back into our landscape. You can't switch your insecticide off overnight, because you'll just see pain and problems because you haven't got the balance back into the landscape. As we're going forward, we've just entered 3 new stewardship agreements across our home farm units, where we're a tenant, share farmed, and owner occupier. So we're now maximising biodiversity benefits and maximising it and minimising inputs wherever possible. So the map looks quite complicated, but what we managed to do is subdivide all of our fields. We have a 30-metre sprayer into 90s or 120s. I like 120s because it was 4 bouts, so it was up and down. We weren't ending up at the wrong end of the field. Three trips with a tram line, for my head, it was always swapping at the wrong end. So we've taken out all unproductive areas, where it gets wet regularly, misshaped pieces, added in a variety of options right across our landscape, maximising the return, but maximising what biodiversity can do within our landscape. And we are seeing real positive outcomes from that, and seeing positive gross margins on our crops. So I also look for new genetics, new varieties. What we're managing to do is use the best of our cropping system with the best of nature. So we no longer use insecticides. We no longer use seed treatments wherever possible. We always get our seed treated. We can see no benefits. And we're actually seeing increased benefits of not using that and stacking that system up. But I think that the opportunity of varieties as they come along to help farmers not see it as a single tool, but an assistance as they put habitats back into their farm landscape, and join up the approach they do in delivering for biodiversity, delivering for crop profitability, and seen nature as an asset in their production. So that was my last slide, because I look forward to some questions, and thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much for that, Martin. That was absolutely fascinating. One of the things that I picked up from that was, yes, it's great to have BYDV resistant wheat, but it's just one tool in the box, and there's so much else that we can harness from nature itself, indeed. Well, look, this is great, and now do keep your views coming in on the chat and in the Q&A. We'll shortly be moving to the Q&A, and we're keen to bring in anyone who has a question for the panel, or perhaps you put insecticides behind you yourself and you've got some tips. We'd be really keen for you to put yourself forward, please. So, but anyway, we're running slightly late. Apologies for this. I'm now going to invite Neil and Kit to join us. Please, if you could switch your videos off, switch your videos on even, and join us. Neil and Kit, yeah, great. So Neil Potts, you're an agronomist with Matford Arable Systems in the Southwest. Would you like to just introduce yourself and say a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, I'm Neil Potts. I've been an agronomist in the Southwest since 1981, so I'm getting a bit long in the tooth. I can remember insecticidal seed treatments with cereals. BYDV in our area is particularly prevalent. We have proximity to coast. Near the centre of the county, of Devon anyway in particular, it tends to diminish as a problem. The centre of the county tends to have higher altitudes as well. It's very much more prevalent in the coastal areas. At the moment, I would be very reluctant to go insecticide-free because BYDV does rob yield, and it's a lot more than the 5–10%. I mean, when we get it badly, it can be anything up to 100% in barleys, and I would go along with Lee's figure, probably looking at 60% yield rob in wheat crops where you get a bad infestation. I have had several customers grow RGT Wolverine. I can say fairly categorically that it's bulletproof. It is doing exactly what RAGT claim. It is offering season-long control, and it's not a question of partial control. It appears to be full control. The problem with Wolverine, from our point of view in the deep southwest, is it's been quite a septoria susceptible variety. And not only do we get a lot of BYDB, but we get a lot of septoria down here too. And I'm sort of looking forward to the day when we get a wheat that's BYDB resistant and has a good package of other agronomic, another good agronomic package, full stop.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's been coming out from this webinar is it's not just about the tool, and indeed we shouldn't just rely on a single tool for any of this. And I think with the best will in the world, it's a bit unrealistic to think that we're all going to, in the first instance, grow wall-to-wall BYDV resistant wheat, because I mean, at the moment the choice is pretty limited. So what about this idea, of using other aspects? I mean, are there other tools in the box that you feel that growers should be confident in using who want to move away from insecticides on wheat? Some of the things that Martin was talking about, for example.
Yeah, I mean, Martin's presentation I actually found very interesting. But the one factor that he has up in Cambridgeshire, which we don't have down here, is field size. A 10-acre field in Devon and Cornwall is actually quite a large field. We have a lot of hedgerows which still flower. A lot of them are flowering at the moment. In order to sort of take out field margins and have strips down through the middle of fields, you've got to sort of significantly impact on the individual field and make for an awful lot of fiddly work. I mean, if you've got a 30-meter sprayer, you're not going to get sort of 2-4 tram lines in a 10-acre field.
Yeah.
So I think our biodiversity down here is probably a lot greater than it is in the east anyway. It certainly has been on a lot of the environment schemes, pilot schemes, right from the introduction of IACS forward. When we've looked at biodiversity down here, we don't seem to be suffering the same issues quite that you are up in the east.
Right. Well, let's move to Kit. So Kit, you farm in Norfolk, and I think you've got experience with Wolverine on your own farm. But would you like to just sort of introduce yourself, Kit, and just give a little bit of a background to what you've seen?
Yeah. Morning, everyone. I'm Kit Papworth. I'm a contract farmer in North Norfolk, although strangely I'm actually in Cambridgeshire today. Look, our introduction to Wolverine was as a seed grower, and my initial thought was, well, that's fantastic because I won't need to get the sprayer out when we're really busy lifting potatoes. That was my start into this. That actually our saving wasn't just in what is a comparatively cheap pyrethroid spray, but also the labour required just when we're extremely busy trying to drill crops, getting potatoes out of the ground and lifting sugar beets. So that was the start to it. but very quickly in the first season, we realised there was a lot of other advantages to this, and we grew Wolverine for 5 years. And as Neil rightly says, you know, we only really stopped because the variety has other weaknesses, which we felt we could get past with other varieties. So the huge amount of potential, and you know, really picking up on what Martin said, all of our contract farms are in stewardship, and I think there's an enormous amount of potential alongside the genetics to do a lot more with wheat without insecticide.
Yeah, well, that's interesting that you say that. I mean, again, what do you think of some of the things that Martin was talking about that he's been doing on his own farm, and some of the experiences from that Assist project that he was talking about?
Yeah, so our job as contract farmers is to maximise the return for our contract farms, and in the past, a lot of them have been very reliant on their BPS, and then what we could do as a margin for them in the past, you know, has been growing as much as possible, you know, in terms of return. And now we are very often saying to them, we really need to look at stewardship in a much more serious way. And so every farm is in stewardship, and as they roll forward into new agreements, we're doing much more around margins and flower margins. We haven't gone as far as Martin yet and starting putting them across fields, but we have got a large number of margins around the outsides. And I think if we can start to incorporate this technology into the other varieties, obviously our cropping is quite diverse, probably more diverse than Martin's in that, you know, wheat is slightly seen as a break crop in our part of the world. We've got potatoes, we've got sugar beet, we've got veg, etc. in there, and a lot of forage maize and vining peas. So huge amounts of opportunities in there. But if we could use this technology, you know, the whole point of this is not about one single variety in Wolverine, and I know Lee has highlighted we've got another variety on the way, but this is about that set of genetics which really can help us as farmers to move away from insecticide. And if we could do that in sugar beet as well, that would completely transform my farm.
No, absolutely. Now, what do you think? We're just about to get this £45 a hectare payment from SFI. And I don't know, how do you, as a farmer, Kit, how do you see that? Is that an opportunity? Is it enough? I mean, we don't know all that much about exactly how it's going to be implemented, but from what you've heard, is this something that is going to, persuade you to go down this route? Yeah.
So those of you who grow sugar beet will be aware that there is a derogation for neonicotinoid seed dressings. We've chosen on all of our farms not to take that derogation. So none of our sugar beet seed has neonic seed dressing. But unfortunately, the reason it's triggered is because there's almost certainly going to be a large number of aphids in early May. And so it's almost certain we're going to have to spray insecticides onto sugar beet. Now, I have got a few contract farms that don't grow sugar beet, and those guys are very excited about the thought that they might be paid not to use any insecticides. But until government is clear that no insecticide means no insecticide sprayed, then we have a problem with sugar beet until we can get the genetics in the sugar beet correct. And we're working quite hard in the sugar beet industry to make sure that the genetics are there to provide resistance to sugar beet diseases, which are really damaging and more damaging, in fact, than they are in wheat. But those who don't grow sugar beet, I think they're excited about this. Personally, I do think it's enough money for it. But if you're growing sugar beet, insecticide-free isn't an option right now.
Great. Neil, just bringing in, I mean, that's a good point that Kit was talking about. Obviously, that's not such of an issue down in the southwest where you don't have there aren't any sugar beet factories anyway. So what do growers feel like in your part of the world about this £45 a hectare payment then?
There's quite a bit of discussion about it. I have to say at the moment, BYDV, if they're cereal growers, BYDV is the big obstacle to adoption at the moment. I personally feel that if we can get BYDV resistant varieties, it's something that we should get behind fairly quickly. I perhaps got a little bit of a question for Lee in that is the technology going to be kept just within the RAGT breeding program, or is it something that RAGTC might be useful to allow, under license and under royalty to go out to other plant breeders as well, so that we can more rapidly end up with BYDV resistant varieties right the way across the industry?
Well, Lee,
well, it's not something we can keep a lid on, Neil, in fairness. Once the variety is in national list, then it's free for any breeder to use as a crossing parent. So I would suspect that every UK breeder and continental breeder, for that matter, has now accessed the technology and has incorporated BYDV resistance into their own pipeline material. We just happen to be the first, and we just happen to be the people that are more advanced in terms of stages of development. So they're starting from scratch, and we're 20 years in.
Great. Well, look, we've got a couple of questions coming in on the Q&A. So I'd like to bring Lee. No, come back in, Lee, and Martin, if you'd like to join us as well. But before we actually move to any of the questions, we're going to run a poll. So do you want to? Should we share my screen? Yeah. So the poll questions that we want to ask are. What activities would you help? Sorry, what activities would help you transition to insecticide-free wheat? We're keen to get your views on this. So would that be on-farm trials? About comparing BYDV-resistant wheat on your own farm to your farm standard? And how would you then? How would we then compare it? We're not talking necessarily about yield here. There are other things that we might want to look at. Demonstration trials. Perhaps this is something for replicated trials hosted and managed by RAGT, or perhaps an independent trialist. An online knowledge hub. This is something that we've been doing with other BOFIT activities, and this is something that we could offer in terms of a place to go for downloadable resources, a discussion forum, and so on, or events. Is a face-to-face get-together more the sort of thing that you'd like to see? So we're going to run a poll. Hopefully that'll come up on the screen in a minute. Yeah, so please put your views in there, whether you want to go for the on-farm trials. Now, we're not saying necessarily that we'll do these, or that we won't do the ones that don't get many votes. Maybe we'll do all of them. But it'd be very, very valuable to get your views on where you prioritize these. So, well, it looks as though on-farm trials is leading, which is not particularly surprising because this is the British On-Farm Innovation Network. And it's great to see lots of support. So, yeah, about 40% of you are saying on-farm trials, and it's about 30% demonstration trials. Then online knowledge hub about 15%, and events about 12%. Well, that's great. So if we end the trial there, yep, the poll. So there we go. There's the results. Fantastic. Great. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Fantastic. Yeah, so now we've got a question that's come through, a couple of questions that's come through. Can we get John Challens to John? I don't know whether you'd like to join us and ask your question in person. If we can. You should find that you can now join us if you want to, John. If you're there. If you turn off turn on your audio, and we'll be able to hear you. Can we turn John's audio on? I'll ask to unmute. I think we can turn. Well, it looks as though we can't Can't get John's audio on, but his question was wheat yellow blossom midge has been more common in the last few years than orange blossom midge, and if a variety is resistant to orange blossom midge, it doesn't mean it's resistant to yellow. So what info do we have on this? And also wheat mild mosaic virus is reported to be in certain areas of the UK. Do we have any information on varieties that are tolerant or resistant? Lee, have you got some information on this?
Yeah, you kind of need one of my colleagues from the research division on this one. So regretfully, I'm the wrong person to ask. I can give you information on soil-borne mosaic virus, but mild mosaic, I'm afraid that's outside of my knowledge base right now.
Right. Well, we'll see if we can get some information on that to you, John. But another question, we've also got James Halford, and again, let's see if the can we get James Halford? James, I don't know if you want to join us. Is James there? We want to join him as a panelist.
Yes, can you hear me?
Brilliant, James. Yes. Do you want to bring your question forward, James? Is James there? We seem to have lost him.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yep, great. Yes.
Sorry about that. So I'm calling in from New Zealand. So I have a couple of years ago, I've gone down the regenerative farming route, and I use untreated, undressed seed, bare seed, and I've stopped using insecticides and had some severe damage in some instances and not so severe in others. And I was wondering, isn't there an alternative like using essential oils or anything else to use as a deterrent that might work against aphids?
Well, that's interesting. Martin, do you have any knowledge or experience as far as this is concerned?
I'm not sure about essential oils, but I know a number of people are trying different approaches. But there's just limited on-farm trials or any industry supporting that. So it could be a replicated trial system that we can have. We need solid data about a lot of this stuff. And just because a farmer used a product and saw a good or bad result, how is that replicated? So I'm all keen to see as much as we can done replicated on farms, a range of products to see what the outcomes are. So if you have some experience there in New Zealand, I'm very keen to sort of learn as well.
No, that's a great idea. No, thanks for the suggestion, James. Maybe that's something that we could look at, you know, some of these sort of alternative ideas. Neil, I don't know whether this is something you've got a view on, or whether, I mean, have some of these sort of weird and wacky treatments, if I can call them that, or sorry, should I say the more sort of regenerative treatments, perhaps, are these something that you've come across or got an experience on? Oh, you need to turn your audio on.
Sorry, yeah, not really. I'm always reluctant to recommend anything that isn't supported by some sort of evidence with my clients. Where people want to go or reduce their insecticide input, the only really reliable way down here with the pressure that we're under is to delay your drilling. If you're into sort of late October or early November, the incidence of BYDV following those sort of drill dates is negligible through most of the county compared to people that are drilling September and early October.
Right. And now we've got Antonia. Thank you very much for putting in a contribution here. Maybe able to help Ray essential oil. Can we bring Antonia into the conversation? Antonia, are you there?
Yeah, there. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Antonia. Yes.
Oh, good. Good.
You've got-
Yeah, I apologize. I actually sort of joined a little later. But yes, I just picked up on your comments on essential oils. There is some ideas and discussions around certain products that could be used for sort of aphid control, and obviously with my UPL hat on, as opposed to my sort of sort of treaty group stroke XAHDB hat on, we have actually been looking at alternative products for a significant amount of time. So if New Zealand is curious to hear about what we have, I will happy to put my email in the chat, and I'll discuss it with my peers over the water and over the other side of the world, and see what they can offer.
Great. Well, that's fantastic. And that, and that's exactly what these webinars are about: sharing ideas, sharing experiences. But listen, I'm afraid we've come to the end of our time slot. Thank you very much to our panelists, to Lee, to Martin, Neil, and Kit, for your really good presentations and for your contributions. Please do stay in touch and continue to send in your thoughts. I'm just going to put my contact details up. If I can share my screen again. So there are my contact details, and do go to the website. There's lots more on the website, and look out for other notices that we'll be sending through. We do have a lot of activity lined up and real opportunities to get involved, as I said earlier. So thank you very much for joining this webinar. I'm now going to bring it to a close. So have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much. Goodbye.